So hey everyone, and in this video we are going to learn about hooks in React.js. So we'll be starting with our very first hook, that is useState hook. So in the last video we have covered the basics. You can watch that to brush up your basics. Now we'll be picking up some base with React.js. So this is the very first video of the hooks. There are many hooks in React.js built for different purposes, but mostly for getting real-time changes. So it's very great to have them so that user interface and user experience is really great. Okay, so here I'm just gonna create a component and I'll just do one thing. I'll just create a folder and I'll just name it as use state example ex. Okay, so ex for example. Okay, don't confuse it with the state. And yeah, this is just example, and I'm just going to create a file named as useState ex.js, and here I'm just going to write RAFCE, and in app.js I would just comment out everything. You can see I had some data here and I also used it previously, but I'm going to explain it properly today. So I'll just comment out everything, and here guys we want to use the useState example. Okay, so useState example. Okay, and we actually want to import this. So what you can do is you can just come back here. Now guys, here you can see we are facing one problem, that is you wrote it but you're not able to import this. If you just put your cursor here, control and space, you don't get any suggestion. Why is it happening? Because your components must be starting with capital name. Okay, so just start with this directory name also. So just say that it starts with capital U. Then I would hit enter, and this would be control F2 and tell U. Okay, and here also guys I would just say capital U and capital U and capital U. That's it. So once you do this, now after this, if I just make it capital U and control and space, you can see that now it's imported very easily. Okay, so you can see that now it's working fine. So you can see that yeah, this works perfectly, but the problem is this directory name is not changed. So yeah, now it's fine. Okay, so sometimes you might get some issues while importing, so you have to change the name, then it would give you proper results. Okay, so now if you show this, if I just reload this, you can see I'm getting this text. That means I'm able to get this. Okay, so you are getting a warning here. Why you are getting a warning here? Because sometimes the name doesn't change. So yeah, it would take some time. Automatically it would be fixed. Okay, don't worry about this, just a warning. Okay, now you can see you can come back here, and here I would explain you what is exactly useState hook. So I would just say that we have to create a hook. So for creating a useState hook, you would just add the variable name. Suppose I want to name this variable as counter. Okay, so counter, counter, and then set counter. Now, what is this exactly? So useState is a hook that allows functional components to manage state. It takes initial state as an argument. So initial state is this, that is 0. This is 0 is the initial state as an argument, and returns an array with 2 elements. So this is actually returning an array with 2 elements. One is the counter. Okay, so it actually returns 2 elements. That is the current state values. It would be containing current value. What is the current value? 0. Current value is 0. And what is this second one? So second one is actually a function to update the value. Okay, so it would be containing the current value. If I just talk about current value, let me just say we have a place here. Actually I'm going to write it properly. So just say we have a h1 tag, and let's say we have current value, and just write it like this. Okay, so current value is what I'm talking about, counter. So if I just show you, you can just see. Okay, I have to just import useState also. So I'll just put my cursor here, control and space, and you would get it like this. So you can see now current value is 0. That means the first item of this useState, the first return of this useState is actually containing a current value. Now I want to change the value. Okay, suppose if I just say set counter, And suppose if I make it 10, what would happen once this page loads, once this component loads? I'm just setting the value of counter as 10. So you would see that the problem here is, yeah, you can't do this directly because it would be infinite. So to fix this, we actually have different kind of things. We can use effect hook or different kind of things, but I would be creating a function. I would be creating a function, and let's say the function name is increment. And suppose this time, if I just say set counter as, suppose if I now make it 10, now if I make it 10, and now I want to just call this function anywhere, okay? So I would just say whenever I click a button, okay? So I would just create a button and I would just call it when I want to change the value, okay? So you would see if I click on this, you can see now the value actually changes, right? So let's say we have one more button which decrements the value, okay? So just copy and paste, and I would just say decrement, okay? So decrement, decrement, and let's say we have we want to just increment the value of by 1, so counter plus 1, and decrement the value, so I would simply say counter minus 1, okay? And I would just say we have a plus button, and similar to this we have a minus button, okay? So increment and decrement, that's how it actually happens here. So you can see if I just first of all reload, if I click on plus, you can see it increments. If I click on minus, it decrements, okay? So very easy to use, very easy to use. Actually what I would do is I would just simply, instead of this, or just write it in between. So I would just cut this, and now I would write this in between of these, okay? That's fine. So you can see that, yeah, I'm able to get this. If I increment, you can see I'm able to increment as well as I'm able to decrement also. So you can also add a style to this. For example, I would just say let's add a styling here only, or else you can write it inside app.css. So I would just want everything to be in a row, so I would just say display is flex first of all. So you would see everything is now in a row, and now I would just want some gap in between, so I would just say gap of 10 pixels in between each element. You can see it's like this. Now you can style these buttons and h1 tag also later on, but you can see that, yeah, it's working perfectly. So this is known as useState hook. useState hook. The purpose of useState hook is it just gives you real-time changes. Okay, so what it did was useState 0 actually initializes the value. That means initial value of counter is 0. So whenever you load the page, you would get 0 as the value. Now the count variable represents the current state. Counter variable represents the current state. So you are printing counter variable here. So you would initially get 0. Now increment and decrement functions actually allow us to increment the value by calling set counter function. I told you that it's returning a value. This array actually returns a value and a function. Okay, so a function, whenever you call a function, you provided parameter and the function would do some task for you. So it actually helps you increment the value. Similarly, it helps you decrement the value. Okay, that's it. Okay, so you are just using this function. Now it very easily it allows you to change the values. Now instead of this, suppose we had a normal variable, like for example we had a variable like let counter equals 0, and I'm just going to say we have a function named as increment, and we'll call this function to increment the value of counter, and similarly decrement to decrement the value of counter. Now what would happen, decrement is actually we have defined decrement. If I just save it, now you can see if I just click on this, you can see now I'm not able to increment or decrement, because once the value is defined of an array of a variable is defined in normal JavaScript, you can't change it in the real time. That's why use effect is used to change the value in real time. Okay guys, so I hope you understood what's the purpose of use effect. Now you can use it for different purposes. Let me just give you one more example. So this was increment decrement, right? So we have one more example. I've just commented everything out. Now right now I would just say that this would be actually containing some of my user data. So for example, it would contain I would just say that we have h1 tag, and I would just say user info. Okay, user info. Now for example, I would just have some kind of data like we have a p tag, and let's say we have some name here, and I would just say name would come up here. Okay, similarly we have one more thing like age. Okay, and similarly we have one more thing like address. Okay, these three things are fine here. Now suppose initially if you are using Instagram, and obviously for different users you would get different user data if they visit their profile. Okay, obviously, so for example I am having a user profile page on my Instagram page. Okay, so I have my user profile. I would get my name, age, address, and kind of data like that. Okay, so I would just say first of all let's create a hook. So const, and I would just say set user, and initially I'm just making it empty. Initially I would just say that values are empty. So right now if I just provide things like user dot name, for example, user dot name. Similarly, I provide user dot age, right? And similarly, I provide user dot address. So you can see this time now user is acting as not a normal variable, it is acting as an object. For example, right now if you see in your page it's empty, but suppose if I just say name is suppose Harshal Jain, so you would see your name is actually here. Okay, so now it actually acts as an object. Okay, that's what you are doing here. Now suppose these are the default values. I would just say address is suppose something. I would just say that address is suppose this. So you can see that you would be able to get the data like this. So this is also very useful. Now suppose if you want to change this data in the real time, how can you do this? So obviously you would be calling a function. So I would just say function, for example, update name, and I would just say whatever was the name, just change it. So for example, I'm just saying that get my old data. That's how you update objects. Suppose you want to update the values, right? So I would just say inside set user function, I would just provide the old values along with the new value. Okay, so instead of Harshal Jain, suppose if I just want to change the name to Viraj Jain. Okay, so you can see that's how it would be helpful. Now wherever you call this function, for example, I would just call this function button, and I would just say update name function. Suppose I'm just calling it here, so it would just update the name into this object. Okay, so very helpful. So if I click on update name, you can see it updated the name. Okay, if I just reload again, it would be by default Harshal Jain. If I update name, so you can see that's how it actually works. Okay guys, so I hope we understood this, how it exactly works, how the use state exactly works. You'll be using this in different projects also, in form data also. Like suppose you have some form data in which you have to store name, email, address, like that. So you'll be storing it that way, and you'll be saving it to your backend. Then you'll be getting some data from backend, and you'll be showing it into your use state hook at the end in your page. So for real time changes, you always use the use state hook. So guys, I hope you understood the usage. useState is a very powerful hook that enables functional components to have stateful behavior, making it easier to manage and update the UI based on changes in different states. Okay, so that's it for the useState hook. In the next video, we'll be learning more about different hooks. I will see you in the next one. Till then, say a good day. Bye bye.